As we saw in part 1, some people enjoy argument, some don't. But arguing a case and assessing the arguments of others is an important part of academic life, and some argue much better than others. They don't fall into the 6 traps that we've looked at. In this second part, we'll think about 4 more key things to look out for, either in putting forward a case or in hearing that of others.
It's been shown statistically that where ice cream sales rise at a beach, there are more drownings. Conclusion: if we ban the sale of ice creams, we can save people's lives. What's wrong with that argument? What's wrong with it is that it's a post hoc, ergo propter hoc fallacy. After this, therefore, because of this. The assumption is that it's the ice cream sales that cause the drownings, whereas in fact, of course, something else, the hot weather, is causing both. Because 2 things follow one after another, we cannot conclude that one thing causes the other. You may think this is an easy error to spot, but scientific studies are full of this mistake. Did you know that the nighttime causes malaria? Well, of course it doesn't, but scientific opinion was at one stage that it did. People who went out at night tended to be the ones who got malaria. Therefore, the night air causes malaria. It was a classic post hoc fallacy. Subsequently, of course, it was discovered that it's mosquitoes that cause malaria, and mosquitoes are the ones that like to go out at night.
Here's an argument made during a period of rapid house price increases.
House prices are rising, but they're going to go on rising because increases in land prices have not been fully reflected in the price of the house. Does that sound a reasonable argument? It's completely wrong. When there's an increase in the demand for houses, house prices rise, and therefore land prices rise. It's not the other way round. Land prices don't lead to increases in house prices. Increases in house prices result in rises in the price of land.
The mistake is another example of the confusion between cause and effect. Make sure you look out for this logical fallacy. It's an easy mistake to make.
Sometimes an action can lead to an unintended consequence that's good. Perhaps the most famous example of this would be Adam Smith. And the great man said this: "It's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love. Why should the butcher provide you with your dinner? He'll do it because it's profitable for him to do so. The unintended consequence of his seeking profit is that you get a nice meal." One example of the law of unintended consequences is the self-defeating prediction. Thomas Malthus claimed that food output would grow much more slowly than population, leading to starvation, disease, and so forth. The American sociologist Robert Merton claims that it was this very prediction that spurred agricultural innovation, preventing the very things that Malthus was forecasting. That's the law of unintended consequences seen in the self-defeating prediction. But most often, the law of unintended consequences is seen in the harmful outcomes of government legislation or action. So don't propose a solution to a problem unless you've thought through all of the consequences first.
Let's look at an example or two now. Firstly, a particularly controversial one. The provision of state pensions to alleviate poverty commands widespread support. But some have argued that it has a serious and unintended consequence. People now feel the need to save less. Less is therefore available for firms to borrow for investment. It slows economic growth. The cost of providing the state pension is much greater than anticipated. Our second example concerns international relationships. The US government has sometimes limited imports of steel in order to protect the steel industry there. Its proponents argue that this protects American jobs. But the policy has an unintended consequence. Steel prices are higher than they would otherwise be. This adds to costs and therefore raises prices in many industries, including the car industry. Demand in these industries is therefore reduced, creating unemployment. On some calculations, the imposition of controls on steel imports has had the unintended consequence of increasing US unemployment. The bee population is shrinking. The EU decided to ban a chemical widely used in agriculture that's known to harm bees. There are now fears that the alternative chemicals to which farmers are turning may well be even worse. The law of unintended consequences in action again.
We shall meet examples of this principle in later films. It's probably the single biggest pitfall that you meet in logical reasoning. You'll never be convincing unless you can use statistics to cite evidence in support of your argument.
Research will reduce the chances of arguing something that seems obvious, but is in fact wrong. Some doctors' surgeries put up notices telling patients about the large numbers of people missing appointments. The idea is to shame people into attending, but research has shown that it has the opposite effect and leads to increased absences. The signs tell patients it's okay to miss an appointment, lots of people are doing it. Research can show that what appears obviously true is actually false.
It's so easy to misuse statistics that this won't be easy. But you'll never be convincing unless you try. With the advance of knowledge, some areas of disagreement over positive issues becomes agreement. And it may be you that turns out to be wrong. Greater in minds than yours have been wrong in the past. There's some evidence that the great economist John Maynard Keynes, when someone challenged him that he'd previously said something different, replied, "When someone persuades me that I'm wrong, I change my mind. What do you do?"
If you think these 10 things through, it will help you to listen to argument. But whatever the risks of falling into these traps, do take part. The way to learn how to engage in debate and discussion is not just to listen, but to join in. A study of students who were members of a gymnasium found that those who ate more tended to be the ones who were thinner. Does this show that eating more is a good way to lose weight? If we raise the minimum wage, lower income groups will gain. Assess that argument. Keep away from doctors' surgeries. It's been shown statistically that many people who go there get ill. What do you think of that view? It was once thought that hormone replacement therapy, HRT, tended to protect women from heart disease. Subsequently, it was found that this was untrue. Can you think why the original studies were wrong? Here's a hint. Women who take HRT tend to come from higher socioeconomic groups. Never let a slogan be a substitute for thinking. Discuss. Comment on the quote in the film of Adam Smith's. It's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love. What does that mean? And how powerful an argument is it for using free markets to organise a society's economy?